You know how when you're playing a game, there are certain rules that you need to abide by in order to play the game well? Wouldn't it be nice if there was like a list of rules for life? I mean, aside from maybe 10 commandments on stone or whatever's in the Bible or any of that stuff, but wouldn't that be nice if there was just a rule book for life? Well, you're in luck. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about rules for life. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
That's all right. Yeah, in case you didn't know, we figured it out. We wrote ourselves a rule book. It works really well.
Mhm. And for three easy payments of
Famous.
79.95, you could have it too.
You know, it's funny when when you mentioned this topic idea, it just reminded me too of I remember listening. So you know how like that show Downtown Abbey was real popular for a while,
Mhm.
and it was like about the time when there was like lords and stuff and so whatever. And I had read something where it was a I think a sociologist or something, but they were making the case that like the reason why people like are attracted to these shows of like those time periods is because there's such defined social rules and boundaries. And like in today's society, there are none. Especially in the
Mhm.
US, there's very few rather. And so like it is like a simpler seeming life because it's like everyone sort of knows like what they're supposed to be doing, who like they're supposed to respect or who's above them, who's below them, that kind of thing. It's like a very clear delineation.
Yeah, having structure makes life a bit easier, and it also prevents anxiety and depression, it turns out. Like does the more I listen and read about this stuff, the more political correctness just effed the whole entire world up.
Yeah.
Because of that, people aren't allowed to be angry, and so they have to repress all their emotions and everything like that, and that causes depression. And then they have to be nice, and it turns out that anxious people, people with anxiety, are people who are just overly nice.
Yeah.
And we bred a world of people who are overly nice with the political correctness, and now everybody's got anxiety.
Yeah. It's funny, Nietzsche talks about it, the internalization of drives. I mentioned it before, right? Where like we can't express a drive outward, it gets turned in on ourselves. And I think there's truth to that, right? And like the healthy way to deal with it is find ways to transform that energy into something positive. So like anger, turn it into something else, like use it for something else.
Yeah,
But
start bladesmithing, just
yeah,
like whacking
yeah.
a piece of metal, putting
Or
it in
like,
a hot
I think like
forge.
you could even look like when we transition careers, like our anger and frustration with our old jobs, using that as a motivation, right? To
Mhm.
to make a change. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's really hard. And I think everybody would love a rule book. And in some sense, I think like, I get the impulse because I think you're right. Like having some sort of structure to your day definitely does help with depression and anxiety. I noticed that myself. Like as I've like started to slowly build routines again and like habits that were like, regular and consistent. Like I noticed like I don't have, and maybe I don't know if that's a direct, it's hard to say if that's a direct consequence or like causal
Mm.
relationship or if it's a correlation between the two. But
Well, I mean, having something that you're working towards kind of defeats hopelessness because it gives you hope that you
yeah.
can kind of achieve that. And the especially depression comes from hopelessness. Like
Yeah, I
this
think
thing,
that's
it's
it.
never
Yeah.
going to get better because you can endure anything if you know it'll end. But if it seems like it'll never end, then forget it.
Yeah. Or it just seems like there's no point to the effort you're putting in. And I think that was always the
Mhm.
biggest thing with depression that got me was like I felt like it was like I could imagine the future, but it seemed like there was so much work required to do that that it's
Hmm.
like, oh, what's the point?
What's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, having goals, having things we're working on, that gets us through that hopelessness because it gives us meaning and like purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, since we did formulate the perfect rules for life, why don't we just go through it? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right.
We don't have any, but
No.
do you think that there
We
are
have no
rules for
idea what the
life?
hell we're doing either.
Yeah. Should there be rules for life?
Okay, I'll tell you this, I'm on the fence about this. I think on the one hand, I think like from an individual perspective, having some boundaries and rules for yourself and ideas of what you're doing that like help you structure, yes, good. From a broad perspective, like I don't want to go back to a time when there was like, you know, in fact, I want to move forward from this time, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like, so
I'm there. I'm right there with you.
so I think like, I don't know if that's necessarily I understand why people romanticize the past. You've seen that throughout history. The Romantics, in the late 1800s, they look back at Greece and Rome as if it was like the perfect society, which in fact it probably wasn't if you were there in real life. But,
Hmm.
they're romanticizing it. We do that all the time because the past feels like it was known and there's that nostalgia. But yeah, I think some like rules imposed on ourselves are good because they can help us do the things we want, achieve the things we want, and remind us of why we're doing what we're doing. But I would be hesitant about like broad, you know,
Hmm.
things.
Yeah. I think that like the concept of rules for life. So it's kind of a natural thing for people want to impose rules on others.
Yeah.
But really the only rules that are worthwhile are ones that you impose on yourself. And not in like a taskmaster type of way, but like if you want the world to be a better place, then you should take your part in making it a better place. And if you want, people not to cheat and not to lie, well, maybe you should do a better job of not cheating and not lying and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah, I think if there was some type of personal rules, it would be that. But also, I don't know, helpful things like don't trust your thoughts, don't
Yeah.
trust your feelings, and everything will change.
I know,
Those
right?
types of things.
Yeah, everything changes. I think that would be helpful. Like just like some recognition of the basic realities of life. Like, change is always going to take place. And things are always going to go by. But yeah, like you said, I think like imposing them on ourselves is a good way to kind of like give ourselves that structure that can help us kind of get to where we want to go. Because I think, we've seen it ourselves, both in our own lives, but with like so many people I know, like they're upset or depressed or angry with their situation, but they don't do anything to change it. And I think part
Hmm.
of that is lacking that structure, like, or the rule even that if I do something, something will change, realizing that reality.
It does take you, like nobody else is going to do it for you.
Nope.
That's the crazy thing. And the like these books that I listen to on psychotherapy, like Team CBT and everything, every not maybe not everybody, but like 99% of people, if they do the homework, they improve. If
Yeah.
they don't do the homework, they stay the same or get worse. And it's just like it just requires you to show up and do it. Nothing really more.
Well, that's the crazy part is like, I always think that like if anybody in the world is already doing something, you can definitely do it.
Hmm.
The problem is it just takes persistence and time, but it takes more time than we think or than we want it to, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And like we all do. I
That
mean, if we
definitely
do this,
makes
yeah, we
sense.
talk this all the time, right? Like we put in effort and then we want to be experts immediately or we want to be really good. And it also takes, I think, reasonableness. Like if I really wanted to start playing basketball for fun now, I'm not going to think that I'm going to become like a Michael Jordan. It's just like that
Hmm.
is past in my life. I'm 40. It's not going to happen. Plus other things. I'm not that tall, like a lot of factors. But I could still get better at it and I could still have fun and I could still do it, right? So like I think realizing that and maybe too, like I think another good rule would be like not everything has to be about money would be good, because I
Hmm.
think so many
But
people
isn't that
don't.
how you win
I
life?
know, right?
By having the most money when you die and the most things?
Dude, gamification's great in some aspects, but that way of it of taking like being like life's a game, you got to win it, like makes no sense because nobody wins.
Hmm. Absolutely. Another thing is like happiness. So like I think happiness is an interesting concept because most people probably want it. And if they say they don't want it, maybe they're lying, but maybe they're, I don't know. But I think most people do want some form of happiness, but it's very elusive. And
Yeah.
I I I heard some like monk or something somewhere along the lines say that like, if you want to be happy, just stop feeding negative thoughts and accept what is. And it's like, oh, that's simple, but it's like the hardest thing ever because negative thoughts are like really juicy and you just want to keep on going down and
Yeah.
down, 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 down. And then accepting what is a really hard thing to do
Well,
sometimes.
that is kind of the funny thing about it though, is like all the things that are actually true that would help us live our lives are usually pretty simple. It's just
Hmm.
implementing them is very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, like that is a good one too, because it is like negative thoughts are very difficult to like, it takes a lot of effort and work to actually get better at not latching onto them.
And negative thoughts too, it's crazy how realistic they can seem
Oh yeah.
because the they're not always true and probably they're mostly not true, but they're very, very believable. And we get caught in these ruts for sometimes years or decades because we believe thoughts that aren't true.
And I think, and oh, dude, I think that's true about everybody. Literally everybody is stuck in some place because of negative thoughts. And it's like, I can't do something, or the world is just this way, or whatever. And so it makes us basically inactive or impotent, right? We don't take the effort to change things. It's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And they're amazingly hard to combat. And you have to and I think that's the hard part for people is like, we can recognize what we need to do, but then everything we need to do to make real changes takes effort. And so it takes that persistence to stick with it, but you're going to fail a lot at first. And I think would be another good thing to remind ourselves is that we're going to fail a lot and it's okay. But if we persist, we'll overcome those obstacles and we'll get through it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. There was something I heard. Oh yeah, fail like fearlessly and so I don't know. But just
I
like this
remember that, but
concept
I
of
don't remember
failure.
the other words. You always
Yeah,
know all the acronyms, is it?
I don't know. No, oh no, not the acronym for it. But I just
Uh,
heard someone talking about like how they want you to fail uh quickly and joyously, repeatedly and joyously, fearlessly and joyfully, something like
Something
that.
like that. One of
And
those
that
combinations.
but like it's an interesting thing because most people like shy away from failure and I do the same thing myself. But like the concept of doing it just like fearlessly and joyfully. Like, because you look at like kids when they do stuff and they mess up all the time and they just laugh about it and they're
Yeah.
like, ha 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 ha. And then maybe they learn. But as adults, we just turn into freaking Eeyore. We're like, oh, I failed. That
I
means
should
I'm a
never do that again.
failure.
Yeah.
My life is ruined. Yeah.
I swear to God, I think that really is though. I think so much of that comes from indoctrination, like school and stuff, because we're only taught to focus on the outcomes, not the process. And so failing becomes
hmm
absolutely forbidden, which is stupid because it gives us this really, I literally, dude, I can't tell you the number of times I've had kids come crying to me because they got a B on something in college. And I'm like, what? Like, dude,
Yeah.
first of all, it's not that bad of a grade. Second of all, the point is to get better, like over
hmm
time, not to be perfect immediately. If that were the case, you wouldn't be here. Like, nobody
Yeah.
would need education, you know? Yeah. But I think that's we've done it to ourselves in a big way with that. I do want to
hmm
point you mentioned something earlier, and I think it's good, which is, the Sartre is very clear about this, but a lot of the existentialists think this, the idea that, we should remember that when we act, we're presenting to the world our idea of what's good, what's acceptable. Right? So like whenever I act, whatever I tell you one thing, right? I might say something, but
hmm
whatever I do, I'm endorsing, right? As good actions, as acceptable actions. And I think remembering that is really powerful because it kind of universalizes our actions to an extent and can help us
hmm
think about, what am I saying to the world when I do this, and is that something I would accept from other people? And if not, maybe that's part of the problem too. So thinking that way can be really helpful, I think, with it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there you have it. We just solved the riddle of life for you. I hope you wrote it all down. Uh,
Some
if you,
rules.
yeah, if you didn't, you can always, listen to the episode again on any podcasting service. You can watch it
Hey,
on
there's a good
YouTube.
rule. Take notes.
Yeah. Rule number 10, subscribe to our channel.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you for spending this time with us. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. Until next time, I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Andy.